2019, all about, making your mark. So here today, we'll make our mark, hopefully on you guys. But first, I want to introduce you to myself and today's speakers. My name is Brian Zanoli. I am Principal Architect, specialized in a little bit of end user computing, a little bit of network virtualization, a little bit of emerging tech, and just overall a technologist. But I'm also joined by Art Janicelli, Lead Solution Architect in Data Center Infrastructures, Tim Durham, the guru and our lead architect around IT orchestration, and a senior consultant from our end user computing practice, John Villa. So let's start off where VMworld started off a little bit before the actual event. And what happened? VMware went shopping. In fact, leading up to VMworld, we had 3 major acquisitions, and maybe even a couple not mentioned here. First, Avi Networks, a next generation application delivery controller company. Carbon Black, a very well-known security company focusing on intelligent vulnerability detection and response. And Pivotal, specializing in modern application development and delivery platforms, both with and without containers. And then jumping right into the keynote, what were some of the highlights? Well, first of all, back in San Francisco, back in Moscone Center. So for those that have been to VMworld in the past, you know that we took a couple years breaks from Moscone. Well, no longer in Vegas, we're back in San Francisco. And then a really cool factoid, just showing the representation at VMworld this year. There were visitors from over 101 countries, almost 5,000 organizations, and all in all, between all the attendees, 116 different languages were spoken. So really quite the turnout. And one major call out that was showcased during the keynote is how much our personal life is merging with digital technology, right? From the moment we wake up in the morning till the moment we go to sleep, we seem to have this device. Our mobile device is sitting either right there or pretty much in our hands. And this is the case not just with phones, but with everything that we're starting to interact with as part of our personal life. And just to show the enormity of scale and how important digital technology is becoming, I wanted to throw this out there, one of the statistics that they shared with us, which is that in 2009, there were 52 million apps. Today, we're now at 335 million. And in the next 5 years, we're going to grow to 792 million applications that are out there. That's huge. That's over double of where we are now, meaning in the next 5 years, we're going to innovate more apps than have been innovated since that very first application was developed. And what is VMware doing in order to adapt to this enormity in scale and quickness in terms of the change of pace? Their message is they're redefining what's possible. And every year, VMware gets on stage. Pat, over the past 7 years or so, has gotten on stage and talked about some of the emerging technologies that they think are relevant to making their vision happen. This year, it's all about AI, edge, and 5G, connected between the cloud. And cloud will define a little bit more what VMware thinks of that. In fact, VMware's vision is what you see here. This idea of the any device running any application delivered from any cloud. If you've been to any previous VMworlds or you've seen any general VMware presentations, this probably looks familiar. This has been iterated just very piece by piece over the past 4 or 5 years from when they originally came up with this vision. And every year they've spoken to it. And so I'd say this year was no exception, and that they are really showcasing technologies that do align with this idea, with the small change that any cloud used to be any infrastructure or any SDDC, but still aligned with that vision. But there's one very important part that may not be as highlighted on this slide, which is on the right, you'll see these little locks, and that represents security, right? Let's bake in security into every layer, any cloud, any application, any device, rather than have it just be an afterthought or a bolt-on. All right, let's get to the fun stuff, the key announcements. Now, I'm going to tease you a little bit because I'm going to talk about VMware Tanzu. I'm going to talk about Tanzu Mission Control. I'm going to talk about Project Pacific, but not right now. We'll cover that a little bit more later. Since those are brand new announcements just released, I want to allow them to be uncovered further on in this webinar. Another announcement, Cloud Health Hybrid, bringing the power of cloud cost optimization, cloud right sizing, instance right sizing, reservation conversion, all of that, bringing that capability to the hybrid cloud, so both on-prem and the VMware cloud, and introducing Secure State is generally available for cloud compliance and further security. VMware Cloud Foundation, now supported by HPE GreenLake, which brings the cost model of an on-demand scalable cloud to your on-prem infrastructure in the way that you can deploy and deliver physical hardware. VMC on AWS, VMware Cloud on AWS, has now introduced support with full AI and machine learning workloads, leveraging NVIDIA GPUs. So your data scientists can now go out to VMware Cloud and AWS and have a field day. And finally, NSX Intelligence, something that allows that really deep dive into the networking and even workload security layer that vRealize Network Insight had previously done, but from a breadth perspective instead. And I'll leave off with the Carbon Black acquisition. Because at first it sounds like, okay, well, VMware is just acquiring an endpoint security company, so does that mean they're just getting into endpoint security? Well, I'd say the answer is probably yes and no. But as you see on this slide here, they really wanted to showcase that, look, it's not just about endpoint. It's about tying this to the workload with integrations in vSphere, integrations to Workspace ONE for their end user computing strategy, leveraging the intelligence behind Carbon Black with NSX, to further enhance your network visibility and security, and then overall cloud security by taking Carbon Black and integrating that with Cloud Health. So that was really kind of the pinnacle of what they're trying to do around security, is show that they're going to leverage this across the board. And that really topped off the keynote for me. So with that, I'd like to dive into a little bit of infrastructure, and I'll hand it over to Art Janicelli.
Good morning, everyone. The theme of VMworld 2019 centered on how VMware can make your organization create a hybrid multi-cloud infrastructure, leveraging vSphere, NSX, and vRealize together as VMware Cloud Foundation to create a seamless platform to effortlessly host and migrate between private or public clouds. To share what you need to know about Skyline, the future all-in-one proactive AI-based management and monitoring for your vSphere platforms, and Optane persistent memory for a massive increase in available RAM speed and storage. Cloud Foundation makes it easy to deploy and run in a hybrid cloud. VMware Cloud Foundation provides integrated cloud infrastructure, compute, storage, networking, and security, and cloud managed services to run enterprise applications in both private and public cloud environments. VMware Cloud Foundation delivers the simplest path to the hybrid cloud by leveraging a common infrastructure and consistent operational model, connecting your on and off-prem data center that is fully compatible, stretched, and distributed. You can see some more of the features that have been updated in Cloud Foundation. Again, highlighting the integration between their different products and the inclusion of Kubernetes going forward with everything. Cloud on AWS, leveraging Cloud Foundation, Skyline, vRealize, vSAN, vSphere, and Optane ties everything together. Your organization can use VMware to manage your vSphere, on-prem, and/or VMware Cloud on AWS with standard management interface that leverages AI for optimal configuration, including support for Kubernetes. And this kind of shows you, how everything is tied together and, which components you're using in the on-prem AWS and your VMware Cloud on AWS. Realize has continued to evolve from a vSphere monitoring, alerting, and reporting application to a fully featured hybrid multi-cloud data center automation, operations, reporting, and alerting interface for all of your vSphere data center platforms. For me, the biggest announcement was Project Magna for vSAN and vRealize, which is VMware's response to HPE InfoSight and Cisco's InterSight, which brings an uncanny level of intelligence to data center operations, in particular for vSAN. Vendors want to make management and proactive troubleshooting easier by leveraging AI. With your organization's consent, they pull your configuration into their cloud database and then process it with their AI. They compare your configuration to other customers who have opted in and can report back to you if your organization has any known misconfigurations, are not following best practices, or if you have a known incompatibility between devices and VMware. The future of these services is to be completely cloud-based, and in addition, to make these recommendations, the next phase will be offering your organization a managed service contract where they will remotely address these issues non-disruptively for you, or schedule outage windows to do this maintenance for you, including upgrades. You see here everything that Project Magna is going to be taking over, from your on-prem all the way up to the cloud. You realize is going to transition to make the leap from on-prem appliance to a cloud-native AI-driven free service from VMware that will continue to add features from vRealize. At the moment, Skyline is focused on vSphere patching for ESXi, vCenter, and NSX. VMware plans to expand into configuration alerting based on AI trending, and eventually hopes to be vendor agnostic by integrating hardware compatibility checks into this platform. In addition, Skyline is integrated with VMware support, allowing them to view your baseline and logs, or collect logs for you, which can save you hours of time and frustration opening a new case. Skyline deploys as a single OVA as a data collector, and since it's a free service, I highly recommend you try this out in order to become familiar with a future tool for managing vSphere. In short, I believe Skyline is the future of vRealize and AI management, and is only going to make things easier. So deploying it now while it's free is a great opportunity to take advantage of a promising future product. Exciting part of VMworld was hearing the latest news from Intel on Optane on ESXi. If you've been following Optane, you've probably already seen the press releases of Optane and read about the rules and placement matrix. Looks pretty complicated, and the application of memory mode versus application mode use cases doesn't jump out at you, which is why I wanted to show these two slides. I've seen these and they didn't mean a lot to me until I got to see it at VMworld. Memory mode, you can add up to 6 terabytes of memory in a 2-socket ESXi host. Intel has designed their Optane-supported CPUs to utilize this memory as a slower memory tier. However, according to Intel, despite this tiny performance reduction, they're still able to increase VDI capacity by up to 25% with the additional memory. In my opinion, persistent memory solutions like Optane are the future of HCI and storage infrastructure. Currently, your VMs or databases are loaded from disk and memory. Until now, developers have had to respect the limits of available memory on a host versus the size of the datasets. With Optane, you are now at the point where it is possible to run anything but the very largest VMs and databases totally in memory, lowering latency from milliseconds to microseconds. Is estimating that it is 30% cheaper than a comparable amount of DRAM, which is a great value. With this price point, in the near future, while you run your VMs and databases in memory, your HCI solution will have the ability to replicate copies of this data to spinning disk, where it can be then archived, backed up, and replicated to the cloud without adding the overhead of those processes to your HCI nodes or database servers, since spinning disk is a far cheaper solution for this data. Another big announcement was vSphere 6.7 Update 3 was formally released. And a less well-known feature that was included in this that has me very excited is the ability to change your fully qualified domain name to vCenter. And I was actually able to test this in production, and it worked without any issues. This is a very important feature for organizations wanting to implement a wildcard certificate or have incompatibility due to their FQDN. And with 6.7 U3, there's also native support for Kubernetes, vSphere, and vSAN. So very important update. So now I'll pass it back to Brian to continue with the next phase.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Art. Really appreciate it. Did a great job of laying the foundation, talking about the various workload types of platforms that we can deploy to. So from here, let's talk about how we're going to connect some of the infrastructure that Art just mentioned, whether that's VMware Cloud on AWS or an on-prem VMware Cloud Foundation. So a couple of years back, VMware introduced the idea of virtual cloud networking, or at least took their product solution sets and came up with or termed it the virtual cloud network, right? This fabric for your multi-cloud journey. And as part of that, they kind of went back and said, look, this started with our vSphere distributed switch. That's when we really introduced to the masses the idea of an enterprise capable, scalable, virtualized network. And we're continuing this on through the integration of NSX after the Nasir acquisition, all the way up to being able to deploy into multiple clouds, secure multiple resources, connect branch IoT with the VeloCloud acquisition through SD-WAN. And so this whole journey is about that delivery of this virtual cloud network. And they've been able to create some visibility into this virtual cloud network, into NSX specifically with vRealize Network Insight. But at the keynote this year and in subsequent sessions, they also showcased NSX Intelligence, which brings that visibility even deeper and allows for further automation and proactive capabilities around rule set generation and deployment, and we'll showcase that a little bit later. But first, I want to pivot just real quick. We talked about Avi Networks when discussing the acquisition. Just want to go over in a little bit more depth what Avi Networks is. They are, as mentioned, an application delivery controller. What that kind of comes down to is they do load balancing and then some. Right? And where Avi Networks is different is they recognize that modern applications typically scale out a little bit farther, smaller services, wider scale. And how do you handle that? Well, you'll decouple the control from the data plane, which is exactly what they did. They created an Avi controller, which can integrate with multiple different types of cloud and on-prem resources, and use that controller to deploy and configure their service engines, if you will, the actual load balancers that do all of the real work. So going back onto track now, we'll talk about NSX and where it came from, right? It started out as NSX V, meaning just vSphere, just running on ESX. But in order to take on all of these workloads, as you see here from public cloud down to private cloud, they realized they had to decouple NSX from ESX. And that's where NSXT came in. The idea behind a network virtualization platform that is not directly coupled with the hypervisor, can run on multiple hypervisors and in the cloud. However, for those that still have NSXV, they are still putting some R&D into it. The last release was in April, 6.4.5. But if you are looking at something like an NSX platform for network virtualization, and you do want to use NSX specifically, definitely go with NSXT. The latest release was in September, and it's NSXT 2.5, and it's absolutely full-featured, on par with NSXV. And right now, if you're already running NSXV, I'd highly recommend looking at what the migration would take in order to take those next steps. At this point, I would say plan for a long migration just to make sure that during the process there's no disruption to your network infrastructure. So what's new in NSXT 2.5? First, great enhancements in analytics and visibility. As I mentioned, being able to dive a whole bunch deeper into both the security and networking layer as it relates to the NSX platform. Multi-cloud security, meaning now we can deploy rule sets to different clouds, whether that's Azure or AWS or on-prem to your NSX deployment on-prem. Using one policy, configure all, right? Make sure that common workloads are being secured in the same manner. Further extending the security around the layer 7 capabilities, that web application firewall type functionality, introducing multi-tenancy into the VPN, simplifying operations by integrating with Log Insight, having its own dedicated content pack now available, automated drafts and rollback for the distributed firewall is another new feature that's been added in. And for those that need a FIPS 140-2 compliance, it's ready, NSXT 2.5. And why does NSX if we take a step back and look at, okay, well, what's the value of NSX, especially in this modern way of deploying infrastructure and applications? It's all about infrastructure as code, right? Traditionally, network automation has been build a config, deploy that config for your switches, routers, etc. With NSX, we get a full API that allows anything that can be configured from within the console to be able to be configured through the API. So now we have posts and get commands that we can use to create code that can then accomplish some goal. Maybe it's, hey, we need to patch our entire set of network infrastructure with these configuration settings. Let's configure this in JSON, push it out, right? So this means it can be leveraged with other service integration systems, automation, and orchestration platforms, or by that lone coder that really loves to do everything manually that you have working on your APIs. And when we talk about enhanced security around NSX and what's been done, it really starts with the app defense story back in 2017, which analyzes the application based on its known good state, creating what you could think of as goodware. Then you have vSphere Platinum, which took that app defense, coupled it with vSphere, did a few security enhancements to what was available within vSphere, layered that together as one single offering. With NSX included, of course, to provide micro-segmentation so that you can create those granular policies, allowing or denying traffic between given workloads and VMs and application types. With Carbon Black, with that acquisition, this further enhances this story by feeding in all of the Carbon Black logic and AI-driven analytics around vulnerabilities, both on the networking and workload side, to create what VMware is calling the service-defined firewall. So leveraging something like Carbon Black and App Defense to determine whether or not your processes are good, and leveraging NSX and VRNI to ensure that your network flows are secure. And what is this NSX intelligence? Well, it looks really cool, first of all, and that's always a plus. But on top of that, gives you a very clean and easy view of your network connectivity state from a security perspective, right? You see in this view here, we have unprotected, blocked, and allowed traffic, red, blue, and green, respectively. We dive in, we can see specifically within these catalogs of different applications or container types, what that communication flow looks like. We've got this application here with unprotected traffic between two categories and allowed traffic from one to infrastructure services. So let's say we want to go through and protect some application, this one here, right? We can, using the power of NSX intelligence, take this and use its recommendation engine to determine what it thinks the policy rules should be for this application. It's done its analytics, it recommends this should be allowed, this should be blocked, etc. But it doesn't just stop there. With NSX intelligence, we now have this simulation capability, as seen in the top right, where we can turn that on and apply it in simulation mode before actually deploying it in production, so we can see what these rules would impact using NetFlow to analyze the traffic flows, right? And then once we are comfortable with IT operations, make sure nothing's going to go down, and network security, make sure that nothing is going to get through, we can then finally apply that policy. And that takes care of NSX on-prem, and it takes care of the networking and workload security layer. But what about cloud? Public cloud, many of us already do know this, but it is worth repeating that public cloud is a shared responsibility model, meaning the public cloud providers are going to make sure that the data center infrastructure at its base layer is secure, and it's going to make sure that certain aspects of the virtualization layer are secure, but you, the customer, are still responsible for applications, data, and resource configurations being secured, right? So VMware Secure State will take this, create a map of how all of these different instances relate to each other, and introduce the idea of violation chaining and risk scoring, which I'll show here. But First, it's a compliance monitoring solution, right? It judges your environment against different compliance rule sets from NIST, FIS, HIPAA, PCI, and lets you know what those findings are, right? Where you're deviating from those compliance rule sets. So very easy, fast view of if you are trying to adhere to a certain specific compliance, whether or not you're in or out of compliance, and the steps that are needed to be taken to resolve that. But the violation chaining piece, this is probably one of the most powerful from a security perspective, especially around public cloud. And this example here, you see that there is a violation. And if it's tough to see, it's in the leftmost instance resource that's been deployed. There's a violation there that's a web server, that is a web gateway in which users are allowed in. On the other side, the top of this network map, you have another service that is an internal service. What this violation chaining rule is doing is discovering that you have multiple instances that are sharing the same SSH key. One is an internal resource, one is a publicly facing resource. That can be a huge security vulnerability. As someone from the outside, standard user or customer, or malicious actor may be able to come in and once gaining those SSH keys, if compromising that system, can use that to tunnel their way through to key sensitive internal systems. So as you can see, the vision is not just taking care of on-prem through NSX security, but also security in the cloud for public cloud on top of that. So VMware has done a really great job of spanning the clouds from a connectivity standpoint and bringing the visibility and security into those clouds, whether it's public or private. All right. I will hand it over to Tim, who will talk all about automation and cloud.
Thanks, Brian. So yes, actually, want to give you a couple of key takeaways from my keynotes and sessions that inspired me. And again, as Brian introduced me, I'm the orchestration architect within Entasis, which means that I'm real headstrong on control, inefficiencies, automating, and cloud, and all those things. So if you're like me and you're interested to try and figure out how to overcome some of these, then you'll find that my lens of the view at VMworld was really all about future and unification and simplification, but probably more so centered around Kubernetes. You know, it almost became humorous in that Kubernetes might have been a drinking game during this session while we were there. But getting into some of my key takeaways here, you know, basically in the automation and cloud arena, VMware is clearly focused on the future. And then again, I reference simplification and unification really as the key focus here. And all efforts is at some level embracing containers to build, run, and manage those workloads. So, you know, we're equally finding that they're focused on multi and hybrid cloud as well. They've had some advancements on that, but you're really finding that they're just continuing that forward movement and aiming at unifying all corners of IT management. The cloud challenges are also a major topic as well. It definitely won't overstep some of those views, specifically centered around the public cloud and securing that public cloud. But truly the eclipse for me was the major announcements of VMware, Tanzu, and of course project specific. And thanks, Brian, for leaving that for me to the limelight on that one. So, you know, as always, VMware is also solidifying confidence in me for supporting their aim forward in innovation and creativity. So that was a big key takeaway from this piece or this time with them. Well, let's talk about containers, and we can all go ahead and have our drink. So container storage, just let me make sure that we also talk about this. The reason for containers really about increasing velocity, control at scale, and improved economics. But we've heard this story before. sounds very similar to virtualization. So I'm going to nickname containers as my next atomic level of virtualization. Yeah, call it marketing, but I think that works for what containers do at that high level. So if we've accepted that paradigm that we're just going to make it a little bit more granular in our ability to control and improve economics and all those aspects about velocity and speed, then VMware is doing a great job to extend that ecosystem for partners to benefit. And project specific will enable the tools to work against container-based applications seamlessly without modifications. And ultimately, project specific will help enterprises to accelerate the development of modern apps while reducing the complexity involved in managing them in a hybrid cloud. So some Tanzu emission control views. So, we need to really dive into each one of these in a greater degree, but we don't have that kind of time. So I'm going to go through these very quickly, but I welcome the opportunity to show these off in greater detail in separate sessions. So please feel free to reach out to us. So I'll reiterate that as well at the end. Really, Tanzu is a partnership with Pivotal, and it's designed to showcase the ability to manage multiple Kubernetes clusters across multiple clouds, all from one central dashboard. Tanzu Mission Control enables customers to manage their Kubernetes footprint across those environments with complete consistency. And basically what we're looking at here is that first offering about the Tanzu portfolio, and they've promised that there's lots more to come. But I did allude to project specific, and frankly, this is one that I probably spent the most time focused on diving into and learning deeply about. And this is really enabling Kubernetes is really what this is about. It gives you the control plane within vSphere, something that we're already very familiar with, to give us that unified access to compute, storage, and networking resource, and also VMs, containers, and the new native pods that are high performing, secure, and easy to consume. Concretely, this really means that IT ops can see and manage Kubernetes objects in the vSphere client, and basically leverage some of those vSphere scripts that you're already using and third-party tools that you can run right against Kubernetes. So this is what some of the client looks like if we're given some of these views away. Really, it remains consistent with that client user experience that you're used to manage these environments. So spinning up an environment is just a matter of taking control, giving it a namespace, and launching out some pods. And the nice thing about the namespace model Kubernetes comes with, and vSphere's embraced, is that it gives us a lot of that governance over the applications and consistency. And they pushed it across VMs, native pods, and the entire clusters. Big advantage as a developer, you can no longer have to rely on IT. IT can give the developers their control to self-service within their cloud resources, but also keep the governance within the capability that you allow those developers to have only. So great advantage here. Another dive into a little bit more screens within the vSphere dashboard when it comes to project specific. So the operations team have that single view that I alluded to for policy and workload within the namespaces. And we can set those limits. In this case, we're talking about the specific resources that we've got available in CPU limits, and all of that's managed again by a namespace and the resource pool that's available to support these limits. And here's an example of how you can adjust those limits that end up in our given application. And then within a container itself, so once we've got an application and we've got lots of containers, we can adjust each container to have a certain enforced range that it can fluctuate within, because containers are a lot more flexible in that aspect. We don't necessarily have to dictate specifically where they need to live and how they need to live. We can actually let them have a little bit of a flexibility and range. And of course, that also comes into that developer's capability that we talked about within those clusters. Storage is another big piece of this, because as we have our namespaces, we can now dictate what those containers are allowed to do and what storage they're allowed to have access to, and be able to have the controls, but also give the right amount of leverage to the right individuals, like I've referenced developers ongoing here. And basically, we build them storage classes and quotas that they can then fluctuate in and out of. And this is another view if you were to have partitioned some of the storage pieces for those policies within a given namespace, in this case, the same day shipping app. We see the storage add number 4 pieces. So the other big focus for me beyond Projects Pacific was the overarching hybrid cloud operations model that VMware has always done, looking at that future. And so for this, I really wanted to dive in and show you how they continue to look at how they continue to unify and simplify their tools to help us bring IT into an easier way to manage, and giving the right security levels and controls and visibility to the right individuals. So, hybrid cloud automations, another big piece that they've just continued to move forward, automating some of the self-serve and deployments, day 2 operation, and really kind of focusing on those complex applications that need to have different controls or reasons why they need to expand and contract, and that also ventures out into the containers, into any cloud control. Self-driving operations. So of course, this is about vRealize Operations Manager, and they continue to make advancements in this and helping again to unify and help bring additional controls as containers are becoming mainstream. Capacity planning and performance management, troubleshooting, enabling. It's all about what Operations Manager has been about, but it's in Operations 8.0, it's more optimized for what we're dealing with today. And this is a big one for us. We spend a lot of time at Entasis really planning and performing cloud migrations. We're living in a world now where multi-cloud and hybrid cloud is the way of the future, and moving workloads is what our future really looks like. If you haven't really clicked with that yet, watch it happen. It's coming. And so, VMware HCX is a leading application in helping to enable that mobility through moving workloads between environments. And that's including on-prem to on-prem, as well as off to cloud. And then in many cases, we're finding customers coming back. So of course, Cloud Health gives us exposure to what we've got and where it's at, how it's performing, and what we need to do to adjust it. Cloud Health's a great tool that we continue to leverage quite a bit, and I'm always awe-inspired with the ability to automate against it to help us fix aspects of what we're doing in the future to make those workloads perform the way they need to, where they need to, and help mitigate and perform as planned. And then again, Wavefront. Really, this is delivering integrated full stack enterprise of observability. So it's a bit of the way that we had Cloud Health in its exposure, but it really is empowering DevOps and Kubernetes and container operations in a more user-friendly and a different view of how it's working, in my opinion. I believe that this is a tool that's probably fitting in a future place within DevOps right now, as Cloud Health is kind of a little overlap in their capability. But I believe that the Wavefront helps us really find that root cause a little bit faster. And I guess the end of this one is really kind of sum it all up. I really was excited again about the whole entire cloud management platform and being able to bring it all in and together into the vRealize suite of tools, and how it really works well to focus on how we're going to adopt and manage IT in the future, and being able to continue to move forward with it in an easy, seamless, and more focused to the direction that we're headed way.
Yeah, that was great, Tim. That's a lot of stuff to cover in a pretty short time. So, I think anyone that's interested in this stuff would definitely be interested in taking you up on the offer of a deeper dive session. But one thing I think it's worth noting, at least on the Kubernetes front, is I believe that VMware is actually the #2 contributor to the Kubernetes open source platform, open source project. So they are really all in on this idea behind Kubernetes. So a lot of exciting stuff that I'm expecting to see from VMware going forward, and I'm sure you're kind of in that same boat.
Very excited. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tim. With that, we'll go forward we've gone through the infrastructure to connecting the infrastructure with networking. Tim's talked about application development, deployment, delivery, and operating and automating all of that. Now we'll go up into the user and see what enhancements VMware has made around their digital workspace solutions and end user computing. So with that, I'll hand it over to John Villa. John, take it away.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning, everybody. And let's go ahead and get going here. So what we're going to cover, there we go. What we're going to cover here at VMworld, with all these announcements and all these really cool product acquisitions and whatnot, oftentimes the digital workspace and EUC practice kind of gets lost in translation a little bit with all the other keynotes and everything else that's kind of going on and all the blasts and things. So I just wanted to kind of reel it in towards the end of this presentation here and just kind of discuss some of the digital workspace solutions that are out there and also the changes that are going on. There's a lot of them going on out there right now. So I've got a very high level overview and we're just going to jump through it. So we're going to look over the Horizon, the Blasted Stream, and the Workspace ONE components here. And so the first and foremost here going forward, the Horizon 7.9 and 7.10, what's new? The direction for 7.10 is going to be a new ESB release. It's that extended service branch. Going forward, you'll notice on the slide, I've got a lot of different bullet points that I've kind of pulled out here. But going forward for the rest of this year and into next, 7.10 is going to have 3 to 5 year service branch support for the long term. And the biggest items in here are the Horizon console. Now, they've actually renamed to the original console the Flex console, and also this new HTML5 console is now just Horizon console. There's essentially going to be feature parity on both, besides a couple key items, your security management and your thin app management. The nice thing about the HTML5 is that as the security server management and thin app kind of moves away, we're going to see that feature parity with vSphere HTML5 as well, and everything's going to kind of be integrated together. Another really awesome feature, instant clones obviously has been pushed for the past 2 or 3 years now, but there's essentially feature parity with link clones. And what I mean by that is they have this new feature called longer lived instant clones. I'm excited for this because you can now create dedicated instant clone pools that you can assign to individual users, and instead of them being refreshed on logout, you can now assign certain scenarios for that VM to live, essentially every couple days, or the percent of utilization on the disk. So if you have those developers that like to set up things earlier in the week, they can now have that actually available all week every time they log in and log out. Another item that's really cool coming forward is the ability to publish Windows 10 applications from desktop pools. So if you have a finicky application that just doesn't like to work on a server operating system, 7.9 and above, you can actually publish an application now directly from a Windows 10 machine for you. This includes your standard Win32 applications and your UWP applications that may be developed within Windows 10. A large announcement that was covered in multiple sessions this year was the new optimization patch for MS Teams and Zoom. Microsoft is really pushing MS Teams for use within the VDI platform, and Zoom as well has finally realized that they're a huge player when it comes to Teams, Zoom, WebEx. And so they've actually got an optimization pack now available for use in beta. And then also I've heard through Zoom representatives that they are actually now creating a Linux beta client for the Zoom optimization. So it's a beta of a beta, but that'll be great for your iGels, for your HPs, and your 10-zig thin clients. Another really nice feature is the real-time audio and video enhancements. These are specifically to be able to support your multiple devices. That's your headsets and your cameras. So if you have let's say an iGel device set up with multiple cameras in a conference room, essentially you can use multi-view. It can be configured to zoom into the individual users that are speaking. The other nice item here as well, this is going to be for some of your multi-hop or nested applications where you may have a hosting provider provider hosting an application within your own VDI, it's now going to be supporting a nested mode, so that headset and camera can be hopped into that VDI session and then also pass through again to that endpoint application on that hosted environment. Horizon Agent updates in general, every release they're getting better with their optimizations. This is a huge CPU utilization release for 7.9 and 7.10. The nice key feature now with the server operating system, so your 2012, 16, and 19s, is they've added additional step for the RDS role to be installed. So you used to have to go in and pre-configure the operating system for use with the agent. Now it's finally added that last little bit for the recommended items to do that for you. Windows support, Windows 10 1909, so they're on the cusp. As soon as a new operating system release for Windows 10 is pushed, they're supporting it right out of the gate. They're also supporting Windows 2019 as well from a server operating system. So they're essentially a full feature parity between Windows 10 and Windows 2019. Also, you've got your Red Hat 8 support. That's new as of the 7.9 and 7.10 release. Another nice feature, as was mentioned in prior slides, the Skyline Log Assist. So going forward, you'll be able to start integrating and streamline your logs, your events, and your additional support for those VMs and your vSphere. That's integrated all within the Horizon bundle out to Skyline. Now, this does require the Horizon 7.10, so just be aware of that. Blasted Stream. So first and foremost, the best part about this one is as of 7.10, they are finally announcing that if there's 100% feature parity between Blast and PCOIP. So the nice part about this is every feature you have available in PCOIP, you're going to have that available in Blast, which is great to see. New feature here, content redirection. So prior, this used to be a Windows only plugin. It was very clunky. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. So as of 7.9 and 7.10, they specifically have agents now for both the Mac, Linux, and Windows clients to be able to redirect these items. So no longer you have to deploy a Windows 10 device specifically for this feature. The new adaptive codec, I'm really excited for this one. So this is going to be replacing the standard JPEG PNG codec, and we'll get into it a little bit more on the other slide. But the idea here is this actually has a with savings compared to the standard JPEG PNG and H.264 codecs. And then following that, codec switching. So now we'll be able to, instead of using group policy or an agent-based policy to specifically state, here's the codecs you're going to use. Now with 7.10, they're automatically going to switch based on the content on the screen between your H.264 and your adaptive text and images. And this is all in part due to that new codec, as well as the new automatic switching codecs that are available within the agent. And then jumping over to Workspace ONE, last but not least. So there's a couple key items that are really neat in Workspace ONE. The digital employee experience management is going to be paramount, I think, moving forward. The ability to predictively and proactively remediate items that the end user may experience in real time is going to be great. It's going to identify those items maybe even before the end user sees it. One of the bigger items that I really like that's coming out of this is the flight recorder. The idea is that using that predictive and that intelligence, it can actually record errors as they happen and then send them to your IT staff to troubleshoot after the fact. So if your end user is unavailable or if there's constant application crashings, it can actually record that in real time and send it back to you. And then also the visibility into the end user experience score. Being able to review like a 1 to 100, how well is the user experience? Are they having application crashes, device crashes? Are they getting their notifications? Are they getting their applications properly? So the idea here is to improve the employee engagement by proactively addressing the end user desktop experience issues, which is going to be great moving forward. A really big announcement, which I think is going to be amazing here, is in Workspace ONE, they're given the ability to send notifications to employees and their devices in real time. So for example, let's say there was a disaster at a location. You can send notifications to all users at that notification and require them to specifically check in through that notification to say if they're safe or if they're still in trouble. So the idea that they can quickly identify everyone's in a safe location or if someone needs immediate assistance. And then, of course, Dell. Dell is wrapping really heavily with Workspace ONE, obviously through VMware, but also their integrations with Chromebook and Google Chrome. The idea here is they have a new laptop coming out, their Latitude, which is based solely on Google Enterprise and their integration in with Workspace ONE. But even outside of that own technology, Dell and their Chromebook specifically are working through and having their Workspace ONE agent persistence, meaning if a end user decides to just power wash their laptop in Chrome terms, then the Workspace ONE agent will stay persistent through the entire time and keep that device attached to the corporation, which I think is going to be great moving forward with these devices. And then, of course, with all these, changes with Workspace ONE and with applications, here in the next probably year or so, they finally announced that they're going to be integrating all these other AirWatch agents and the catalogs and the current Workspace ONE app into the Intelligent Hub, or now just deemed Hub. So instead of having to point your users to different applications and different catalogs based on what operating system or device they have, it's all going to be moving into Hub moving forward. So you're going to have that agnostic approach. Unified user enrollment. So this is great. This is essentially just going through and they're saying, hey, across Apple, Microsoft, and Google products, we're going to condense the amount of enrollment features and requirements for each device. So each is going to have an unmanaged, a partition, and a managed scenario. So the idea there is it's going to be giving the user, especially with a bring your own device scenario, the ability to choose how far they would like to enroll their device, instead of having in prior Workspace ONE releases where you might have 5 or 6 different enrollment types. They're really trying to condense that across the board. A big item here specifically to call out for Android is they now have the ability to have a registered mode specifically for Android. And what this is kind of in between your registered across the board and manage, but it gives you additional support for BYO. And the idea here is it gives you more application sets without having to go to a full managed scenario. And this is partly due to the Google Work profile that's now available. They're able to give you more control while still giving users full access to their applications without completely turning over their devices, which is really nice. And then, of course, day one support for iOS 13. Obviously, they're working through a beta right now. They're planning on the full support day one once it actually gets released in Q4. As far as the user enrollment, the click all the way through for the user flows, which, as far as iOS, they keep coming in and saying, hey, we're going to change the way that corporations and end users work. So it's definitely one of those that'll be great to see going forward. At that point, I'll hand that back over to you, Brian.
Yes, thank you so much, John. Man, that was a lot of content to go through. I feel like I went through a whirlwind just now, and I helped put all this stuff together with these guys. So I can only imagine how you all feel. So, moving on to what we're going to do next, before we jump into and I talk about Test Drive and just give you a quick teaser of what that is, I just want to reiterate, if you guys, anyone has any questions around any of this, or would like to schedule a deep dive session focusing on any of the topics that we covered or more, anything that you heard about at VMworld that you're interested in, reach out to us, reach out to your Intuitive 360 account executive, and just let us know. We'd be happy to come circle back around and dedicate another hour to sitting down with you and really diving into some of these topics. So with that, I want to introduce you to what VMware Test Drive is. And if you have not heard of VMware Test Drive, it is a POC environment that VMware has set up specifically so that partners like ourselves can give you access into key technologies, the kind of technologies that we've talked about today. We will be hosting a webinar, a 30-minute webinar on October 8th, so do keep an eye out for that webinar invite. But as a preview of what you can see as part of Test Drive, you see Workspace ONE, as John mentioned, Horizon for VDI, whether it's in the cloud or on-prem, all of these different applications that can be tested. That's just on the end user computing side. Jumping into cloud, vSAN, POC and demo environment is available that will show you both vSAN operations inside of the vSphere console as well as in vRealize operations for vSAN. PKS can be spun up and tested, the pivotal container services, so that you can see how Kubernetes can be deployed at scale on a vSphere environment. And finally, we have vSphere Platinum. If it wants to show up here, vSphere Platinum is what I mentioned before, which includes the App Defense product with NSX and soon to be integrated with Carbon Black. So if you want a walkthrough of any of these, we can absolutely invite you. If you want to just check out the webinar, we'll dive into them in more detail and show you exactly what kind of things can be tested and what you'll have access to play with, whether it's a demo or sandbox environment. And so with that, I want to thank my presenters, John, Tim, Art. Thank you guys so much for putting in the hard work, and thank you for joining me today. Thank you all on this webinar. Really appreciate your time. And again, if you have any questions or would like anything any kind of follow-up, let us know. Reach out. We're here and happy to help. So with that, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your week. And take care.